Happy Good Friday, guys. Um, Making a little bit of a Bible study video. It's more about my testimony, and then, at the end, I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the culture. Um, and I'm sorry for the rough appearance. It's been a rough week. Nothing bad's, extremely happened. In fact, if anything, a lot of stuff has turned out for good. But if you wouldn't mind just keeping my family in prayer, I'm not going to talk about it or go into it, but just, lift my family up in prayer right now would be really appreciative of it. So, in honor of kind of what's going on with Easter and, the reason we celebrate, Jesus dying and then raising from the grave and doing what he did for us, paying for our sins, I figured I'd go in to some of the things that God's done for me. I was raised in the church, and I'm going to try to make this not too long. This is actually like my second time recording this, because the last one went way too long. But I was raised in the church. I remember being extremely young, and one of my memories was of saying, the sinner's prayers, they call it, basically asking for forgiveness of your sins, dedicating yourself to Christ. So I did that at a really young age. Family was, went to church every Sunday, but there's some rough things that happened for my family. My brother, who was just an infant at the time, passed away. Later on, my parents got divorced, and this isn't to be like a woe is me type thing. It was hard things that happened to my family. So it wasn't like, white picket fence, beautiful house, nothing bad's ever happened. There was a lot that went on, and it was rough, but God got me and he got my family through it. It doesn't mean it was easy, but he got it through it, and we were living in northern Idaho at the time, and I remember we moved back down here to Boise area. And my mom, one of the things my mom was really, really good at was making sure that we were in church, and so we continued going to church. And when I went and visit my father, we'd go to church, and they were both really good about encouraging that sort of Christian lifestyle and following after God. Around the age of somewhere between 10, 11, 12, I felt called to go into the ministry, and I was baptized about the age of 12, and things were really just, I was on fire for God. I really encountered God in just such a way that it was undeniable what he was. It was that overwhelming love, and if you've never experienced it, it's hard to understand that. But it was basically at a young age. There was no doubt for me. There was no doubt that Christ was real, that he died, that he rose again, that God was real, that all these things that we're taught in church, these were all real. And I was on fire for God at the time, but as I got older and became a teenager, I started becoming a stupid teenager, and I still followed after God. It was just, there were more struggles in there, and I almost started living this life where I wore a self-righteous mask. Like, I was this good person, on my mask, but behind it there was a lot of things I was doing that weren't right, and I was almost living a duplicit life. And so that started around that time. My struggles with certain things in my life, really started taking root. So I was planting, all these wild seeds, these thistles in my life, and I was still serving God. I was still doing my thing, but, I was still doing this other dark stuff on the side. Nothing crazy. And I wasn't like, selling drugs or doing drugs or anything like that, but just stupid teenager stuff. Around the age of 18, that summer, I felt called to go into the military and prayed on it, and I joined the Army on my 19th birthday. Went off to basic training, and because there was a Christmas break in the middle of it, I got to come home for 2 weeks, got married at an incredibly young age of 19. My wife at the time was 18. I don't suggest doing that, especially when you've got, stuff in your own life that you haven't got figured out. But anyway, I digress. It's not about that, it's about my testimony, right? So, went back after that 2 weeks, completed my training, went through some rough patches, and being young, being gone, not knowing how to really handle marriage or relationship. Then I got, deployed, and that added on, and there was just a lot of chaos going on in my life. And boot camp really started for me as I was able to do things. I was able to minister to people. I mean, everything was stripped away, so the only thing I had during that time was God. But as I got done with boot camp and moved into things and got deployed and had all these other things, I stopped clinging to God like I did. And I started living that same life, this self-righteous mask that I put on, but yet I was still just as corrupt in my heart. And so I lived that way and came back and, trying to make my marriage work, but not knowing how. And I was a jerk too, so that didn't help. I had a lot of problems I needed to work out, but I didn't. And ended up, having my first child during that time, which that in itself was really scary. She, it was a pretty normal pregnancy as far as I know, because I wasn't the one carrying the child, but the day she arrived, it was an emergency C-section. We found out she had trisomy 21, which is a form of Down syndrome. It's the type of Down syndrome where it's just a glitch in the sperm or the egg, and the odds of it for someone, as myself and my wife at the time, having that happen is incredibly rare, but it happened. And ended up finding out that she's gonna have to have heart surgery. And so we did the first heart surgery, and it did great, and it went well, and it was easy and went smoothly. And then we had a second one that was unplanned, that was emergency. And at the time, the doctor was pretty much telling us there's a 5% chance she makes it out of this. And out of that 5% chance, she's either gonna have to have a pacemaker or she's gonna have to have a mechanical valve, and it's gonna be something ongoing. And I remember just being wrecked, and I know that I had so much family praying for me because, God got us through it. I was living this double life, but yet God was still providing for me, still taking care of me. And my daughter got out of the surgery, and it was just a miracle, because not only were they able to fix her heart, but she didn't need a pacemaker, she didn't need a mechanical valve, nothing like that. And so we took her home, and, I started getting closer to the end of my 4-year enlistment, and I felt God was telling me to stay in the Army, but I ignored it. I was just so done. There's so much that had happened, so much, I'm a person who likes, some sort of structure. And yeah, the military, they say is structure, but it's structured chaos. And, so I came back home, and I was like, okay, I'm going to get into ministry. I'm going to start getting really involved in my church. And it went well for about 3 months, and then it all just fell apart. All of those thistles I'd sown in my life finally, and in my marriage, and all these things, this double life, finally it was time to pay up for it. And my marriage fell apart. The ministry I was in fell apart in the sense of I stepped down. There's some other stuff that happened, but basically I ended up walking away from church, and walking away, not walking away in the sense of, I was like, God, I'm done with you. But it was more like, okay, God, I know I'm not perfect. I know that I have my flaws, but I've tried living it your way, and now I'm just going to do what I want. I'm going to do it, what David wants. But in reality, I was already doing that. I was just, at this point, I took off the self-righteous, mask I was wearing. And so I started living a life of, doing what I want. It wasn't anything like crazy. Again, I wasn't like selling drugs or anything, but I was living with my girlfriend, which, in today's society, what's the big deal with that? But guys, it really does. There are some big things that can come of it, But anyway, I was doing that. I was doing my own things. Wasn't really involved with church, and got my girlfriend pregnant, and then I was working a construction job that required me to drive really long distances, and during that time, all throughout that time, I was dealing with a lot of anxiety, I never in my life had panic attacks, but I was starting to get panic attacks. Just, and part of it is, that God he was putting his heavy hand on me. And, if you look at Psalms 32, verse 4, it says, "For day and night your heavy hand was upon me. My volatility was turned into the drought of the summer." And that's what was happening in my life. I was starting to experience that drought, that dryness, and all the things that God had helped me with before. It wasn't that he wasn't still there for me, because there were many times that, I'm alive by the grace of God. I was on my way to work that morning, and I don't know what happened. I ended up getting in a wreck, and it should have been way bad because the road I was on was very windy. If you live in Idaho and you drive, I believe it's the road up to McCall, and you're going through that canyon, you'll know what I'm talking about. I got in a wreck on that road, and usually people who get in a wreck on that road, they are, off in the river floating away. But the way I ended up getting in a wreck was I actually got spun out, hit a barrier, bounced off the barrier, and didn't go flinging into the river. The curve was away from the river. And God protected me on that when I didn't deserve. I wasn't like being this perfect Christian, it was the grace of God. But his heavy hand was still on me. And so that yearning for God, that thirst that I had when I was young was starting to return. It was like, man, this life I'm living it's unpleasing. It's stressful. And so I started listening on my way to and from work to the Christian radio station. I started listening to preaching and stuff. And at first it was just something because A, there was barely any radio stations where I was driving, but B, that hunger was there. And so it started almost like an infection of God, in a sense. It started worming its way in my life, and I started looking at things and started going, I've got to get back to what God wants me to be. This life I'm living is not what he wants. And so I started praying. We got married. I joined the reserves, all these things that, I'm not saying that, joining the reserves was of God, but it was a needed step for me to provide for my family. And I think in the sense I'm supposed to be in the military for some reason, I don't know. But anyways, Psalms 32:5, "I acknowledge my sin to you and my iniquity, and I have not hidden. And I will say, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgive me the iniquity of my sin." And God began cleaning my life up. He started removing the things that needed removed. My relationship with my wife just blossomed and grew into this wonderful thing, this wonderful family I have now, where God just started blessing me, and I wasn't perfect. And I'm still so far from perfect. I'm still working on things. And that's why I say my testimony is incomplete, because I'm still not where I need to be, but I'm not where I used to be. And, God has just been so gracious to me. He's provided my family with so much. And if you're out there right now and you've lived a life similar to mine, where you were raised in the church and you've kind of, you pray to God and you go to him during those crises and those times of need, but then you're back doing your own life and you're experiencing the things I experienced. Just want to encourage you, come back to God fully. And I know that sometimes we get fearful of that, which is so weird in a sense, but it's like, well, if I do this, then I'm going to give up this, and I'm going to have to let go of this, and I don't know if I can do that. Or I'm going to have to change up my living situation. Just come back to him right now. Just come back to him as you are, and God will help you clean up all those things. And then all those things end up falling off, and you're like, man, why did I ever worry or care so much about those things? I just, and even if you weren't raised in the church, or you were raised in a different religion, and you carry around burdens, guys, come to God with them. It's amazing what he does and how he does things. You know, he gets you through that process of not wanting to let go of certain things. And then you're like, you let go and you're like, man, that was easier than I thought. So if you're dealing with, you know, anxiety, and I still deal with my issues with anxiety, but it's so much easier to deal with something like that when you have God versus dealing with it on your own. Because on your own, there is no hope. But with God, there's hope. With God, that you know that your life isn't just your own, but it's God's. And so I just want to encourage you, if you're living in the world and you're just tired of it, you're tired of the hollowness of it, come to God. It's a lot easier to do than you think, and you don't have to sit there and go, well, I'll get this straightened out, I'll get that. No, just come to him, and God will help you get those things straightened out. It's amazing how he does it, and I know I'm repeating myself, but guys, it's so amazing what God has done for me and for my family, and how undeserving I was, you know? I still believe I'm called to ministry. I don't know the extent. I'm still working on trying to get myself back into church. And we're kind of looking for a church for me and my family. But even with everything going on, God has just blessed my family. He's helped us through some really hard stuff. He's always provided for us. And I'm just telling you, just come back to him and he'll do the same for you. Well, that kind of leads me to the next point of this video, which kind of goes with it, kind of not. But, you know, if you look at the culture right now and you see where things are going, it's crazy. It's chaos. It's hard to even understand. You know, you've got, you know, Lil Nas, who came out with that music video, which I watched that video because I wanted to know what the heck was going on. And I'll tell you this, it's not like, you know, there's that saying that the devil doesn't come in with, you know, a pitchfork and horns, and he usually comes in a business suit. Well, not with this video. He comes in straight in with the, you know, horns and hooves and all of that in this video. It's very clear, you know, in that video that it isn't a good video. And then you've got Carly B's performance, you know, at the Grammys, which unless you've been extremely busy, you probably know what happened, so I'm not going to get into it. But these things that are going on, this is evil. And it's okay to call it for what it is. I know that as Christians, we kind of have to walk this line of being loving, but at the same time, you know, still being the salt of the earth. And that's not to say that we should be like, you know, the ones standing on the street corner with a sign that, you know, you're going to hell, this is an abomination, all that stuff, because that's not the right way to go about it. But at the same time, we shouldn't be like, well, you know, that's nice and all, it's okay, let's not say anything. You know, it's like if you were a doctor and you treating a patient for cancer, and you wouldn't walk in there and be like, you're dying of cancer, dude, good luck, see you later. As in, you know, the ones that get rabid about it, those kind of Christians. But you also wouldn't walk in and be like, you know, you have cancer, but, you know, you could continue to smoke and, you know, continue to put that stuff in your body that's causing you cancer. I'm sure it'll be fine. We can't be that way either. We have to be loving and kind, but we still have to point out the truth. And you can do so in a kind way. There's a difference between, and I said this in my last video, there's a difference between being nice and kind. Nice is when you know, someone says or does something that's bad, and you just like, oh, okay, well, I'll let them be them and not say anything. Kind is, hey, in a loving way, I'm going to tell you that this is wrong. And we can do that as Christians. I know it's hard because we've seen so much on the pendulum on one side or the other, but it's okay to do it in a loving way. And just know that everything going on, this is nothing new in the world. It might be a sign of the, you know, the times we're living in, but I mean, look at Rome back in the day when Paul was around. Rome was pretty corrupt. I mean, they were, you know, a lot of the sexual immorality was still going on. And then, you know, they were feeding people to lions and stuff like that. But, you know, Paul says something about that, that kind of thing going on that's going on today. And it's Romans 12:2. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is good and acceptable in the perfect will of God. So guys, we live in this world. And that kind of goes along with my testimony. God renewed my mind in some of the things and my understanding of how I lived with this self-righteous mask. And, you know, to stop being conformed to this world. And that's how I'm going to try to tie it in with the earlier part of this video. But, you know, let's read verse 3 as well, because I think it's a great verse. For I say, through the grace given to me, to everyone who's among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, as God has dealt to each one a measure of faith. And that's where I get into, we don't have to be this self-righteous, ready to thump people on the head with our Bibles, but we have to be loving and speak the truth. It's okay to call evil evil, but at the same time, remember to love those people that are practicing that evil. Loving them in a way that Jesus would love them. That means, yeah, call out the sin, but make sure you're also praying for them. Pray for this, you know, Lil Nas guy. Pray for Carly B. Because the lives they're living, I mean, if I look back at my life and the things I did and how hollow and incomplete I felt, I can only imagine that when you're serving so much of the flesh and living so dedicated to that life, how rough it must be, how hard it must be. And, you know, to be to the point where you're just objectifying yourself as a object, that's gotta be rough. That's gotta be hard. And I know the world says it's empowering, but guys, it's not. It's throwing yourself into some really heavy chains. So pray for these people. You know, call evil for evil, but pray and love these people. Anyways, I've taken enough of the time on here. Again, I was trying to make this video shorter than the last version. I don't know if I accomplished that or not. But just know that God loves you. He really does. And if you're living in this worldly life, know that He provides a way out of it. And for us Christians that are trying to serve Him and trying to find how to interact with this world, remember to love those people, but call out evil for evil. I hope you guys have a really awesome Sunday. Happy Easter. Spend some time with your family. And just keep this country in prayer. Keep our people in prayer. Thanks, guys.